The Jharkhand student protest is becoming more about politics than the students, and that's exactly the problem we are talking about. I have been watching the conversation around the Jharkhand student protest, and honestly, I think somewhere along the way, we have started discussing the wrong thing. The conversation is increasingly becoming about who is supporting the protest, whose political side is benefiting from it, how many people are on the streets, and whether it is getting the same attention as protests in the Jantar Mantar. And in all of that noise, I think we are losing the sight of a very simple question. What are the students actually protesting about? Because if you strip away the politics, the slogans, the comparisons, and the social media debates, this is fundamentally about the recruitment system in Jharkhand. The students are actually raising concerns about the way recruitment examinations conducted by bodies like JPSC and JSSC have been handled, concerns around the irregularities, delays, transparency, and accountability. And their demands are not particularly very difficult to understand. They want disputed examinations to be addressed. They want independent investigations wherever necessary. And moreover, they want structural reforms so that the same problem don't keep repeating themselves. And I think that's where the conversation should begin. Not with how many people are protesting, not with which politician is supporting them, and definitely not with why isn't this protest as big as the Jantar Mantar one. Because the legitimacy of a protest cannot simply be measured by the number of people standing behind it. See, JPSC is a state level recruitment process, so the students affected by it are primarily fighting over the recruitment machinery that is very specific to Jharkhand. So, obviously, the scale of participation is not necessarily going to be like the Jantar Mantar because there, the protest was happening about NEET, and NEET is a nationwide examination and it is affecting aspirants from each and every state. I was a victim myself. So I think I find the entire Jharkhand versus Jantar Mantar comparison so weird and strange. See, you cannot automatically compare two protests simply because both involve the students and examinations. The NEET issue, for example, as I said, has a nationwide scope affecting aspirants across the country, but JPSC and JSSC are different institutions. They operate within a different state level recruitment ecosystem. So the different scope does not mean one grievance is more legitimate than the other. And this is something that we really need to understand about the protests in general. A protest does not become constitutionally or morally valid only after it reaches a certain number. So if 10,000 people are raising some kind of issue somewhere legitimate, and that issue does not suddenly become less legitimate, sorry, so that protest does not become less legitimate because another protest had 1 lakh people. So, and if our first response to a protest is how many people are there instead of what are they actually saying, then I think we have already started looking at protests through the wrong lens. Because ultimately, these aren't just numbers at all. Behind every competitive examination is a person who has spent years preparing. And behind that person, there is often a family or a friend or a partner that has invested time, money, expectations, and emotional energy into the possibility of a stable future. So when an examination is delayed, questioned, cancelled, or surrounded by these allegations of irregularities, you are not just talking about an administrative inconvenience, you are talking about someone's years, and years are something that students don't get back. uh, but here is where my bigger problem begins. I feel like this genuine student issue is increasingly being turned into a political scoreboard. People who are interested in settling the political scores are now trying to use the protest to prove that their political side cares more about the students than the other side. And that is where I think we need to be careful, because if your outrage appears only when a particular protest helps your political narrative, then are you really standing with the students, or are you standing with the political usefulness of their suffering? And this is not about saying that people who are politically involved shouldn't support a protest. Of course they can. The problem is when the students and their actual demands become secondary to the politics surrounding them. too much rant, but the same applies to our outrage as citizens. We cannot have a system where we are extremely vocal when a particular group of students is suffering because it fits our political beliefs, but completely indifferent when another group faces injustice because it does not fit our political beliefs. If accountability matters, it has to matter even when it is inconvenient for our side also. So that to me is the real taste, because the point of a protest should not be to prove that one political party is better than the another. The point should be to make the institution answerable. And if there are allegations against a recruitment system, investigate them. If the allegations are false, establish the thing transparently. If they are true, hold the people accountable. And most importantly, fix the system so that the students aren't forced to spend years preparing for the examinations only to question whether the process itself can be trusted or not. Because at the end of the day, this should not be about Jharkhand versus Jantar Mantar. It should not be about BJP versus Congress. It should not be one political ideology versus the another. And it should not even be about which protest has more people. It should be about something much, much simpler. Can a student in Jharkhand trust the system that is deciding their future? And if the answer is becoming no, then that is the conversation we should be having, not who wins the political argument. The students shouldn't become the scoreboard for someone else's politics. This should be the reason the system is held accountable. That's all I have to say.